"Don't stop. I need this," she cried as the Vampire King held her inside his candlelit chamber. The poison was burning through her veins like liquid fire, and the only thing keeping Lysandra conscious was the Vampire King's hands pressed against her temples, drawing the toxin out through some ancient magic she couldn't name. But when he hesitated, sensing the agony it caused her, she grabbed his wrists with trembling fingers and gasped, "Don't stop. I need this." Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The candlelit chamber in the east tower of Thornhaven Castle had been designed for exactly this purpose. Purification rituals that required absolute darkness except for the 47 candles arranged in precise geometric patterns across the stone floor. Each flame represented one of the old powers, the primal forces that existed before vampires, before humans, before the world had sorted itself into the neat categories of predator and prey. Lysandra Ashford had arrived at the castle 3 hours ago, carried through the gates by 2 of King Mordecai's guards after collapsing in the village square. She'd been hunting a rogue vampire, a newborn who'd been terrorizing the borderlands, killing indiscriminately, violating every law of the covenant that kept the peace between species. She'd tracked him to an abandoned church, cornered him there, and learned too late that he'd been bait. The real trap had been the 12 other vampires waiting in the shadows. They'd overpowered her quickly. She was good, but not that good. And their leader, an ancient vampire named Silas, who'd been exiled from the king's court decades ago, had given her a choice: join their rebellion against King Mordecai or die. She'd chosen neither. Instead, she detonated the sanctified explosive she kept for emergencies, destroying the church and most of the rebels. But Silas had escaped, and before he'd fled, he'd bitten her. Not to feed, not to turn her, but to inject her with something far worse. "Nightsbane," King Mordecai had said when his healers examined her. His voice had been calm, but his silver eyes had flickered with something that might have been concern. One of the oldest poisons. It doesn't kill quickly. It corrupts. Turns the victim's own life force against them, makes them a weapon that destroys everything they touch. You have perhaps 6 hours before the transformation becomes irreversible. "Then cure it," Lysandra had gritted out, fighting against the convulsions racking her body. "There is no cure, only transference." He'd stood from where he'd been examining her, his tall frame casting long shadows in the torchlight of the healing chamber. "I can draw the poison into myself. My nature as Vampire King makes me resistant, not immune, but resistant enough to contain it until it burns itself out. But the process is unpleasant for both of us." How unpleasant? Imagine every moment of pain you've ever experienced concentrated into a single hour. Then multiply that by the fact that I'll be inside your mind, sorting through your memories, your fears, your secrets, everything that makes you who you are, searching for where the poison has taken root. There will be no privacy, no barriers. You'll feel everything I feel. I'll know everything you are. Lysandra had looked at him. This Vampire King should served for 5 years as a hunter in his employ. This immortal ruler who maintained the fragile peace between the supernatural and human worlds through a combination of absolute authority and surprising mercy. She'd hunted for him, killed for him, risked her life dozens of times to enforce his laws. But she'd never truly known him, never been closer to him than a formal debriefing after successful missions. Now, he was offering to save her life by merging their consciousnesses. by experiencing her most intimate self while she experienced his. "Do it," she'd said. That had been an hour ago. Now, in the candlelit chamber with the geometric patterns of flame surrounding them, Lysandra knelt on the cold stone, while King Mordecai stood behind her, his hands against her temples, his ancient magic flowing through her nervous system like ice water through burning coals. The pain was exactly as he described. Every injury, every heartbreak, every moment of grief and loss she'd ever endured, all replaying simultaneously at maximum intensity. She could feel his presence in her mind, not invasive exactly, but undeniably there, a vast, cold intelligence sorting through her memories with surgical precision. She saw herself at 7 years old, watching her village burn during a vampire raid, felt the terror, the helplessness. But alongside her memory, she felt his reaction: rage at the violation of covenant law, sorrow for the child she'd been, determination to find those responsible. She saw herself at 15, training with the Hunters Guild, learning to kill vampires with ruthless efficiency. Felt her hatred, her need for revenge, and felt his understanding, his acknowledgement that some vampires deserved what they received, that his own kind produced monsters he himself had to destroy. She saw herself at 23, the day she'd met him, summoned to Thornhaven after taking down a nest of rogue vampires who'd been operating in the king's territory without permission. She'd expected execution or punishment. Instead, he'd offered her a position. "You kill efficiently and without unnecessary cruelty," he'd said. "That suggests intelligence. I value intelligence." Through the connection, she felt what Head thought that day: recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who understood that violence was sometimes necessary but never something to enjoy. He'd been lonely then, she realized, was still lonely now, 600 years of existence having taught him that few beings could understand the weight of absolute authority. The poison thought back. She could feel it trying to burrow deeper, trying to hide in the recesses of her consciousness where his magic couldn't reach. It latched on to her darkest memories, her most painful secrets, using them as shields. It found the memory of her younger sister, Clara, who'd been turned by a vampire when Lysandra was 19. Clara had begged her for help, begged her not to let the transformation complete, begged her to end it mercifully before she became a monster. And Lysandra had done it, had killed her own sister with silver and prayer while Clara wept and thanked her. The poison wrapped itself around that memory, amplified the grief until Lysandra screamed. She felt King Mordecai's magic hesitate, felt him sense that pushing deeper into this particular wound would break something in her that might not repair. "Don't stop," she gasped, her hands still gripping his wrists where they pressed against her temples. "I need this. I need it out of me, whatever it costs." His voice came not through her ears, but directly into her mind, resonant with power and something else. Respect, perhaps. "It will destroy this memory. The poison has intertwined with it so completely that I cannot extract one without damaging the other. You'll remember the events, but you'll never again feel them with the same intensity. The grief will dull. The love you had for your sister will become abstract, known but not felt. Better than becoming a weapon that kills innocence. Better than losing myself completely. Do it." She felt his magic surge deeper, felt him reach into the memory where the poison had nested. The sensation was indescribable, like having surgery performed on her soul, like feeling pieces of herself being carefully, precisely excised. The memory remained, but the emotional weight lifted, became manageable, became something she could carry without it destroying her. The poison fought harder, tried to flee to another hiding place. It found her guilt. The 17 vampires she'd killed over the years. The 3 who'd begged for mercy, claiming they'd never hurt anyone, claiming they were just trying to survive. She'd killed them anyway, following orders, following doctrine that said all rogue vampires were threats. Through the connection, she felt King Mordecai's own guilt rise to meet hers. The hundreds he'd executed over centuries, the innocents caught in conflicts he couldn't prevent, the weight of every decision where mercy and justice had been impossible to balance. His guilt dwarfed hers, vast and ancient, an ocean compared to her puddle. "You feel this every day?" she thought at him, awed and horrified. "Every moment of 600 years. It's the price of power, Lysandra, the price of being responsible for so many lives." The poison tried to use that shared guilt, tried to corrupt it into something toxic. But King Mordecai was ready. His magic wrapped around it, contained it, began pulling it free with inexorable patience. Lysandra felt layers of herself being exposed, memories she'd forgotten, dreams she'd abandoned, fears she'd never acknowledged. He saw all of it. The time she'd fallen in love with a fellow hunter who died on a mission. The secret relief she'd felt when her abusive father had died. The recurring nightmare where she became the monster she hunted. The desperate hope that her life meant something, that the killing and sacrifice and loneliness were for a purpose larger than just survival. And in return, through the connection, she saw him. 600 years of memories flashed past. His human life as a minor noble, his transformation into a vampire, his rise to power through a combination of ruthless efficiency and unwavering principles. She saw the woman he'd loved and lost 500 years ago, the children he'd protected, the wars he'd ended and the wars he'd started, the countless decisions that had shaped the world she lived in. She saw his vulnerabilities too, the fear that his methods were ultimately futile, that peace was temporary and war inevitable. The loneliness of being the last reasonable authority in a world increasingly polarized between extremists. The exhaustion of maintaining control through force of will when every instinct screamed to either retreat into isolation or embrace the monster his nature suggested he should be. "You're more human than most humans," she thought at him, surprised by the realization. "Humanity isn't about species, Lysandra. It's about choice, about choosing to be better than your nature demands. You understand that better than most." The poison was losing. She could feel it weakening as his magic systematically destroyed its hiding places, pulled it free from her consciousness, drew it into himself. But the process was taking its toll. She could feel his strain, feel the poison beginning to affect even his considerable resistance. "It's hurting you," she said aloud, her voice raw. "Yes. Then stop. This is enough. I can fight the rest myself." "No, you can't. If I stop now, it will root itself too deeply to remove. You'll have perhaps 3 hours of lucidity. Then you'll begin killing. Everyone you care about, everyone nearby, random innocents. The poison will drive you to destroy until you're stopped. I won't allow that." "Why do you care? I'm just a hunter, one of dozens in your service." She felt his answer before he spoke it, felt the truth through their connection. "Because you remind me of what I was." Before the transformation, before the centuries, before the weight, you still have the capacity to choose mercy over vengeance. That's precious, worth saving. The final extraction was the worst. The poison had one last refuge, her core identity, the fundamental sense of self that defined who Lysandra Ashford was. To remove it from there meant temporarily dissolving that identity, becoming nothing, then reconstructing herself from the pieces that remained. "I'll hold you together," King Mordecai said. his mental voice steady despite the strain she could feel through the connection. "Trust me." She did. She let go of herself, felt her identity dissolve like sugar in water. For a timeless moment, she was nothing. No memories, no personality, no self. Just consciousness witnessing its own absence. Then she felt him gathering the pieces, sorting through them, discarding the corruption, keeping everything essential. Felt him carefully, methodically rebuilding who she was, like an architect reconstructing a house after removing a poisoned foundation. He added nothing that wasn't hers, removed nothing but the poison, but the act of being deconstructed and reconstructed changed something fundamental. When she returned to herself, gasping and shaking on the stone floor of the candlelit chamber, she was still Lysandra Ashford, but she was different, cleaner, clearer. The pain that had driven her for years, the need for revenge, the guilt, the self-destruction disguised as duty, all of it remained, but it no longer controlled her. King Mordecai collapsed beside her, his perfect composure finally breaking. She could see the poison's effect on him, black veins spreading under his pale skin, his silver eyes flickering with darkness. He was containing it, but barely. "How long until you recover?" she asked, her voice hoarse. 3 days, perhaps 4. The poison will burn itself out in my system, but until then, I'll be vulnerable. He looked at her, and despite his obvious pain, he smiled slightly. "Ironic. I saved you by making myself defenseless. If Silas knew, he'd attack immediately." Lysandra sat up slowly, testing her body. The poison was gone. She could feel its absence, feel the return of her normal strength and clarity. She looked at the Vampire King lying weakened beside her, this immortal ruler who just rifled through her entire existence and somehow still chose to save her.
"Then we don't let Silas know,"
she said firmly.
"Where are your guards?"
"Outside the tower. The ritual required privacy. Only us, only here. Standard protocol for purification magic."
"Then they don't know you're weakened?"
"Not yet, but they will when I don't emerge by dawn. They'll send for the council, who will secure the castle and assign a regent until I recover. Standard succession protocol."
"Which gives Silas 3 days to attack, while you're vulnerable and the power structure is in flux."
"Yes." Lysandra stood, her legs shaky but functional. She moved to the chamber door, tested it, locked from the inside, as King Mordecai had instructed before the ritual. Good. That meant they had time to plan.
"How many people know about Nightsbane poison?"
she asked. "Very few. It's ancient knowledge, restricted to the oldest vampires. Silas learned it during his time in my court, before his exile."
"So if someone was poisoned with it, others wouldn't necessarily recognize the symptoms?"
"Not immediately, no. They'd see sickness, weakness, but not understand the specific nature of the corruption." King Mordecai's eyes sharpened despite his obvious pain. "What are you thinking?"
"I'm thinking that you just saved my life by making yourself vulnerable. I'm thinking that Silas expects me to either be dead or corrupted by now. I'm thinking that no one except you, me, and Silas knows what really happened tonight."
She turned to face him fully. "And I'm thinking that we can use all of that." The plan took shape over the next hour while King Mordecai recovered enough to sit upright and the candles burned low around them. It was audacious, dangerous, and relied entirely on the trust they'd built through the mental connection they'd just shared. "Silas wants your throne," Lysandra said, pacing the chamber. "He's been building a coalition of exiled vampires, promising them power and freedom from your laws. But he can't move openly while you're strong. That's why he used Nightsbane. It's a delayed weapon. He expects me to return to the castle, hide the symptoms until I'm too far gone to control, then go on a rampage that forces you to kill me personally in front of witnesses. Which would damage my authority," King Mordecai continued, following her logic. The king who couldn't save his own hunter, who had to execute her publicly. It would show weakness, create doubt, then Silas attacks while the court is in turmoil. But I'm not corrupted, and you're only weakened temporarily, so we have an advantage he doesn't know about. Explain. Lysandra stopped pacing, looked at him directly. We fake it. I pretend the poison is still working. You pretend you couldn't cure me, that you're uninjured but forced to execute me. Silas hears about the execution, assumes his plan worked, attacks while he thinks you're dealing with political fallout. But instead, I'm alive, you're recovering, and we're ready for him. King Mordecai considered it. It requires convincing everyone, my guards, my court, my allies, that you're about to become a monster and that I'm forced to kill you. They'll demand to witness the execution to verify I'm enforcing my own laws. So we give them a show. You execute me with something that looks fatal but isn't. I pretend to die. You have me taken to— She paused, thinking. Where would an executed hunter's body go? The catacombs, beneath the castle. There's a chamber for those killed in service. They're interred with honor rather than burned as criminals would be. Perfect. The catacombs are secure, isolated. I die, get taken there, and then we wait. You recover in private. Your quarters are guarded and secure. No one would question you isolating yourself after executing one of your own people. When Silas attacks, I'm your hidden blade. He won't see me coming. It's risky. If anyone discovers you're alive before Silas makes his move, they'll think I've been corrupted or controlled. The court will fracture. The covenant itself might collapse. And if we don't do something, Silas wins anyway. He gets away, regroups, tries again when you're actually vulnerable. We end this now, or we spend years watching our backs. King Mordecai was quiet for a long moment. Then, you'd trust me to fake your death convincingly enough to fool everyone? After what we just experienced, you know I have the power to actually kill you if I chose. After what we just experienced, I know you won't. You don't kill unnecessarily. It's why you're fit to rule. She met his silver eyes steadily. And you trust me enough to let me guard you while you're vulnerable. We just spent an hour in each other's heads. I know you're honorable. You know I'm loyal. That's more trust than most people ever build in a lifetime. He smiled, and it was genuine this time, not the political smile of a ruler, but the appreciation of someone who'd been truly seen and not found wanting. Very well, but we need to plan the details carefully. The execution must be public, witnessed, documented. Your death must be unquestionable. They spent the next 2 hours working through the specifics. King Mordecai would announce at dawn that his attempt to cure Lysandra had failed, that the Nightsbane corruption was progressing, that execution was necessary to prevent greater tragedy. The court would be summoned, witnesses assembled, everything documented according to covenant law. The execution itself would use a technique King Mordecai knew, a strike that appeared fatal, that stopped the heart and breathing, but could be reversed within a specific time frame by someone with precise knowledge of vampire magic. To observers, Lysandra would appear completely dead. The court physicians would verify it. She'd be taken to the catacombs, and once alone, King Mordecai would reverse the process remotely through a spell he'd place on her before the execution. It will hurt, he warned. Dying, even temporarily, is not pleasant. And the resurrection will be worse. Your heart has to restart, your lungs reinflate, your brain reboot. You'll experience several minutes of agony. I've experienced agony before. I'll survive. Yes, you will, because you're remarkably stubborn. It's kept me alive this long. As dawn approached, they finalized the last details. King Mordecai taught her the signal she should use if Silas attacked, a specific pattern of knocking on her tomb that would alert the guards without revealing she was alive. He showed her the secret passages from the catacombs to various parts of the castle, routes she could use to reach him quickly if needed. "The poison should be fully neutralized in my system by the 3rd day," he said. "Silas will likely attack on the 2nd night, long enough for news of your death to spread and for him to believe I'm politically weakened, but not so long that he risks me recovering my full strength. Be ready." "I will be." He stood with effort, the black veins still visible under his skin but less pronounced than before. "Lysandra, what we shared tonight, the ritual, the connection, that was necessary for the cure, but it was also profoundly intimate. I want you to know that I won't abuse that knowledge. What I learned about you remains between us." "I know. Same for what I learned about you." She paused, then added quietly, "For what it's worth, I think the weight you carry would break most beings." The fact that you're still choosing to be better than your nature, that's remarkable. So is your choice to protect someone you have every historical reason to hate. Your village was destroyed by vampires, your sister was turned, yet here you are, about to fake your death to save a vampire king. Because you're worth saving, not despite being a vampire, but because of who you choose to be while being one. She smiled slightly. Also, because I really want to be there when Silas realizes his plan failed. That's going to be satisfying. King Mordecai laughed, an unexpected, genuine sound. "I believe you've been spending too much time around vampires. You're developing our sense of vindictive satisfaction. Or you've been spending too much time around humans and developing our capacity for hope despite evidence." Perhaps both. Perhaps that's exactly what the world needs. Humans and vampires who understand each other well enough to see past species to character. The first light of dawn was breaking through the chamber's single narrow window. Time to begin the performance. "Ready?" King Mordecai asked. Lysandra straightened her shoulders, arranged her expression into something approximating fear and desperation. "Ready. Let's give them a show they'll never forget." The throne room of Thornhaven Castle filled with courtiers, guards, hunters, and various supernatural dignitaries within an hour of the announcement. News of a nightsbane poisoning had spread quickly. Such incidents were rare, historically catastrophic, and always demanded immediate public response. Lysandra was brought in under guard, her wrists bound with silver chains that burned her skin. The burns were cosmetic, painful but not dangerous, applied by King Mordecai's most trusted healer, who'd been told only that they needed to make Lysandra look legitimately corrupted. The healer had done excellent work. Lysandra's skin had a feverish sheen, her eyes were slightly dilated, and she moved with the twitchy unpredictability of someone fighting internal demons. King Mordecai sat on his throne looking perfectly composed, showing no sign of the poison still working through his system. Only Lysandra, who'd spent an hour in his mind, could see the micro-expressions that betrayed his discomfort, the slightly slower blink rate, the infinitesimal tension in his jaw. "Lysandra Ashford," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber with absolute authority. "You stand accused of infection with nightsbane poison. The council has reviewed the evidence, consulted the ancient texts, and concluded that purification is no longer possible. The corruption has advanced too far. Do you have anything to say before sentence is passed?" This was her cue. Lysandra had rehearsed this moment mentally during the hours of planning. She let her voice shake, let genuine fear seep through, not fear of death, but fear that the plan wouldn't work, that something would go wrong. "My lord, please, there must be another way. I've served faithfully for 5 years. I've killed only those who violated your laws. I don't want to become the thing I've hunted. Please don't let me die as a monster." Murmurs rippled through the court. Several hunters looked genuinely distressed. Lysandra had friends among them, colleagues who'd fought beside her. Good. The more genuine the emotional reaction, the more convincing the execution. "There is no other way," King Mordecai said, and she heard the carefully controlled regret in his voice. Only she knew it was regret for the deception, not the act. The Night's Bane cannot be extracted once it reaches the final stage. If I delay, you will transform. You will kill innocence. Everything you fought to protect will be destroyed by your own hands. He stood. Execution by royal authority, immediate and witnessed in accordance with covenant law. Your service is recognized. Your sacrifice will be remembered. But the law is absolute. "No!" The shout came from Marcus, one of the senior hunters, a man who'd trained Lysandra when she'd first joined. "Sire, she deserves a chance. Let us try containment, observation, research." "And risk how many lives while we research?" King Mordecai's voice cut through the protest like a blade. "I understand your sentiment, Marcus. She's your student, your friend. But I am king precisely because I make the decisions others cannot. This is one of those decisions." He descended from the throne, moving toward Lysandra with deliberate slowness. To the observers, it looked like a king reluctantly approaching an unpleasant duty. Only Lysandra saw the quick hand gesture he made, the signal they'd agreed on, confirming he was ready to proceed. She dropped to her knees, playing her part. "Please, if I must die, let it mean something. Let it prove that even in corruption, humans can choose honor over survival. Don't let this poison make me into propaganda for those who say we're all eventually victims." It was a good line. They'd crafted it specifically to appeal to the political factions present. The human contingent would appreciate the declaration of human agency. The supernatural allies would respect the recognition of honor transcending species. King Mordecai placed his hand on her shoulder, the gesture that would initiate the execution spell. Through the brief contact, she felt his magic begin to work, felt her heartbeat start to slow under his carefully controlled power. "Your death will mean something, Lysandra Ashford. It will mean that laws apply to all, that service doesn't exempt anyone from consequences, and that sometimes the greatest sacrifice is accepting an unjust fate to prevent greater injustice." His silver eyes met hers, and she saw the message there. "Trust me. This will work." She nodded almost imperceptibly. Then his magic surged through her, and her heart stopped. The sensation was indescribable, not pain exactly, but a profound wrongness, like a machine grinding to a halt against its fundamental purpose. Her lungs seized, her vision tunneled. She felt herself falling forward, felt King Mordecai catch her and lower her gently to the floor. Distantly, she heard gasps, heard someone crying, heard the formal proclamation. Lysandra Ashford, hunter in service to the throne, executed for infection by Night's Bane poison on this day, witnessed by the assembled court. Let her sacrifice be recorded and honored. Her last thought before consciousness fled was satisfaction that they'd sold it perfectly. Then everything went dark. Lysandra woke to agony. Every nerve in her body screamed as her heart restarted, as her lungs inflated with a gasp that felt like inhaling broken glass, as her brain rebooted with all the grace of a carriage hitting a wall. She was in darkness, lying on cold stone, and for a horrible moment she thought the plan had failed, that she was actually dead, and this was some nightmare afterlife. Then she heard King Mordecai's voice, quiet and close. "Breathe. The pain will pass in a few minutes. You're alive. You're safe. Breathe." She focused on that, breathing, one breath, Another. The pain began to recede from overwhelming to merely terrible. She felt his hand on her forehead, cool, steady, grounding. "How long?" she managed to rasp. "4 hours since the execution. You're in the catacombs as planned. The court believes you're dead and interred. I've posted guards outside under the pretense of honoring your service, but they're actually here to ensure no one disturbs you until you're ready to move." Lysandra's eyes adjusted to the darkness. They were in a small stone chamber lit by a single candle. Stone shelves lined the walls, tombs for honored dead. She was lying on a preparation table, still in the clothes she'd been executed in. "The court?" she asked. "Convinced. Several hunters are planning a memorial. Marcus is devastated. I'll need to find a way to tell him the truth after this is over. The political response is exactly what we hoped for. Sympathy for the difficult decision, recognition of the law's importance, and widespread discussion about the Nightsbane threat." He helped her sit up slowly. "Silas will hear within hours if he hasn't already. Now we wait." "And you? The poison?" "Receding. I should be at full strength by tomorrow evening, which means Silas needs to attack before then." He studied her face. "How do you feel, beyond the physical pain? Angry that dying hurts that much? Determined to make sure Silas regrets using me in his schemes? Oddly grateful to be dead, if that makes sense." "It does. There's a strange freedom in being removed from the board. No one expects anything from a corpse." They spent the next several hours preparing. King Mordecai brought her food, water, and fresh clothes from his personal quarters. Dark, practical garments suitable for combat. He updated her on the castle's security status, pointed out the shifts when guards would be most alert or most tired, showed her on a map the most likely points of attack. "Silas is arrogant, but not stupid," King Mordecai explained. "He'll come during the second night, as we predicted. He'll bring his best fighters, probably a dozen veterans. They'll target my private chambers, assuming I'm politically weakened and emotionally compromised after the execution. Standard overthrow tactics. And the guards? Will fight. But Silas's vampires are old, strong, experienced. My guards will hold them for a time, but eventually they'll be overwhelmed. That's when you intervene. When Silas thinks he's won. When his focus is on me rather than watching for threats. Dramatic. I approve. I thought you might." As they planned, Lysandra found herself reflecting on the strange intimacy of their situation. Not physical intimacy. King Mordecai was unfailingly proper in his behavior, but the deeper connection of two beings who'd seen each other's souls and chosen to trust anyway. She knew his fears and vulnerabilities. He knew hers. They were operating on a level of coordination that most soldiers took years to develop. "Question," she said during a lull in planning. "After this is over, after Silas is dealt with, what happens to us? To this?" She gestured vaguely between them. "What would you like to happen?" "I don't know. I've been a hunter for years. It's all I am, all I know how to be. But after experiencing what we did, after seeing your perspective and having you see mine, I'm not sure I can go back to simple hunting. Everything feels more complicated now." King Mordecai nodded slowly. "I understand. You've seen too much of the gray areas to operate in black and white anymore. That's both a gift and a burden. So what do I do with it? Whatever you choose. But if you want a suggestion, I could use someone who understands both worlds. Someone who can navigate between human hunters and vampire politics. An advisor, perhaps, or a liaison. Someone who knows when force is necessary and when diplomacy might work better. You're offering me a political position? I'm offering you a choice. Continue hunting if that's your calling, or expand your role to something more nuanced. The world needs people who can see multiple perspectives without losing their moral center. You've proven you can do that." "I'll think about it," she said, "after we survive the next 2 days." Fair enough. The second night arrived with tense anticipation. King Mordecai had returned to his chambers, maintaining the appearance of a ruler dealing with the political fallout of a difficult execution. Lysandra remained in the catacombs, armed and ready, monitoring the castle through the secret passages King Mordecai had shown her. The attack came at midnight. Silas brought 14 vampires, all veterans of conflicts predating the Covenant. They breached the outer walls using magic that disrupted the standard wards, moved through the castle with military precision, cutting down guards who tried to stop them. By the time they reached King Mordecai's chambers, they'd killed 12 guards and injured 20 more. Lysandra watched from her hidden vantage point as Silas kicked open the chamber doors. King Mordecai stood by his desk, showing no surprise, no fear, just cold assessment. "Silas," he said calmly, "I wondered when you'd arrive. Subtlety was never your strength. You're alone, weakened by the execution, and facing 14 of the oldest vampires in existence," Silas replied, his voice dripping with confidence. "Surrender or die, those are your options." "I think not." King Mordecai's smile was dangerous. "You see, Silas, you made several critical errors tonight. First, you assumed the Night's Bane would work as planned. It didn't. Second, you assumed I was emotionally compromised. I'm not. And third, most fatally, you assumed Lysandra Ashford was actually dead." Silas frowned. "What?" Lysandra dropped from the ceiling passage directly behind Silas's group, her silver blade already in motion. She'd spent 5 years training for this, 5 years learning to fight creatures faster and stronger than humans. She'd learned that speed wasn't about moving faster, it was about moving efficiently, wasting no motion, striking with precision rather than force. The first vampire went down with silver through his spine before he registered her presence. The second turned fast enough to see her, but not fast enough to block her blade across his throat. Silver didn't kill vampires outright, but it disrupted their healing, made them vulnerable to conventional damage. The room erupted into chaos. Silas vampires, suddenly realizing they were surrounded, split their attention between King Mordecai and Lysandra. That split focus was fatal. King Mordecai was no longer weakened, his speed returning as the poison burned out of his system. He moved like lightning, like darkness given form, destroying 3 vampires in as many seconds. Lysandra focused on controlling the space, preventing Silas's forces from coordinating. She used the furniture for cover, used her smaller size to slip between attacks, used every dirty trick she'd learned hunting alone against superior opponents. Silver powder in eyes, blessed chains tangled around legs, improvised stakes from broken chair legs. "You should be dead!" Silas screamed, abandoning any pretense of control as he watched his carefully planned coup collapse. "The Night's Bane was cured," King Mordecai said, catching Silas by the throat mid-lunge. "By me. In a ritual you were too arrogant to anticipate. And then we used your own plan against you, letting you think you'd won until you exposed yourself completely." Silas struggled, but King Mordecai's grip was iron. Around them, the last of the rebel vampires fell, some dead, some wounded and surrendering. Castle guards poured into the chamber, securing the survivors. "Silas Darkmoor," King Mordecai pronounced formally, "you are charged with treason, murder, and violation of the Covenant. Your sentence is death, immediate and witnessed. Do you have anything to say?" Silas spat blood. "You can't hold power forever, Mordecai. Someone will eventually. Someone will eventually succeed where you failed? Perhaps, but not today." King Mordecai's magic surged, and Silas simply ended, dissolved into ash that scattered across the chamber floor. The room fell silent, except for the heavy breathing of survivors and the groans of the wounded. Lysandra lowered her blade, suddenly exhausted. The fight had lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. King Mordecai crossed to her, examined her quickly for injuries. "You're hurt." "Scratches. Nothing serious." She looked around at the destruction. "We won." "Yes, thanks in no small part to your intervention." He raised his voice, addressing the assembled guards and courtiers who'd arrived in the battle's aftermath. "Let it be known that Lysandra Ashford's death was a deception, a necessary tactic to draw out traitors. She lives, she fought with honor, and she has my gratitude and protection. Anyone who questions this will answer to me personally." The room erupted in confused muttering, but no one dared challenge him directly. Marcus pushed through the crowd, stared at Lysandra as though seeing a ghost. But I saw, you were dead." "Temporarily," Lysandra said with a tired smile. "It's complicated." The aftermath took weeks to fully resolve. Silas's surviving conspirators were tried and punished according to the extent of their involvement. The Covenant held emergency sessions to address the security breach and strengthen protocols. King Mordecai gave countless testimonies explaining the deception, walking a diplomatic tightrope between those who praised the tactical brilliance and those who felt the methods violated trust. Through it all, Lysandra found herself in an unusual position, neither quite hunter nor quite courtier, but something in between. She attended strategy meetings where military action was debated, but also diplomatic sessions where words replaced weapons. She trained new hunters, but also taught them about the complexities of supernatural politics, about the gray areas between justice and vengeance. She accepted King Mordecai's offer, not as a title or formal position, but as an evolving role that combined her skills with her newfound understanding. She became his eyes and ears in situations requiring someone who could navigate between worlds, who could speak to human hunters and vampire lords with equal credibility. 2 months after the attack, she found herself back in the candlelit chamber where it had all begun. King Mordecai had summoned her there, saying only that there was something he wanted to show her. The 47 candles were lit again, arranged in the same geometric pattern. But this time, there was no poison, no ritual, no emergency. Just 2 beings who'd seen each other's souls and emerged changed. "I've been thinking," King Mordecai said, "about what you said during the purification, about loneliness, about choosing to be better than one's nature." "What about it?" "I think perhaps the greatest antidote to loneliness isn't finding someone who's the same as you. It's finding someone different enough to challenge you, similar enough to understand you, and trustworthy enough to see you completely without flinching." He gestured to the candles. "These flames represent the old powers, the primal forces that existed before distinctions of species or nature. They remind us that beneath all our differences, we're all choosing how to exist in the same world." Lysandra studied the pattern. "That's surprisingly philosophical for a vampire king." "I have my moments," he smiled slightly. "What I'm trying to say, rather badly, is that you've become important to me. Not as a hunter or an advisor, though you're excellent at both, but as someone who sees me, all of me, and chooses to stand beside me anyway. That's rare, precious." "Same," Lysandra said quietly. "Everything I thought I knew about vampires, about revenge, about justice, you've complicated all of it, made it more human, ironically." "Made me realize that the monsters aren't defined by what they are, but by what they choose to do. So, where does that leave us? Partners, I think, in whatever form that takes, fighting the good fight, making impossible decisions, trying to make the world slightly less terrible while accepting we'll never completely succeed." She moved to stand beside him, looking at the candlelight patterns. It's not the life I imagined as a young hunter, but it's the one I choose now. Then I'm honored to walk it beside you." They stood together in the flickering light, two beings from different worlds who'd found unexpected common ground in the space between. The candles burned on, representing forces older than memory, reminding them that some connections transcend the boundaries mortals draw. And in the darkness beyond the chamber, the world continued, complicated, dangerous, occasionally beautiful. They would face it together, choosing in each moment to be better than their natures demanded, to see each other truly, to trust despite every historical reason not to. It was enough. It was everything. King Mordecai crossed to her, examined her quickly for injuries. "You're hurt. Scratches, nothing serious." She looked around at the destruction. "We won." "Yes, thanks in no small part to your intervention." He raised his voice, addressing the assembled guards and courtiers who'd arrived in the battle's aftermath. "Let it be known that Lysandra Ashford's death was a deception, a necessary tactic to draw out traitors. She lives, she fought with honor, and she has my gratitude and protection. Anyone who questions this will answer to me personally." The room erupted in confused muttering, but no one dared challenge him directly. Marcus pushed through the crowd, stared at Lysandra as though seeing a ghost. But I saw. You were dead." "Temporarily," Lysandra said with a tired smile. "It's complicated." The aftermath took weeks to fully resolve. Silas' surviving conspirators were tried and punished according to the extent of their involvement. The Covenant held emergency sessions to address the security breach and strengthen protocols. King Mordecai gave countless testimonies explaining the deception, walking a diplomatic tightrope between those who praised the tactical brilliance and those who felt the methods violated trust. Through it all, Lysandra found herself in an unusual position, neither quite hunter nor quite courtier, but something in between. She attended strategy meetings where military action was debated, but also diplomatic sessions where words replaced weapons. She trained new hunters, but also taught them about the complexities of supernatural politics, about the gray areas between justice and vengeance. She accepted King Mordecai's offer, not as a title or formal position, but as an evolving role that combined her skills with her newfound understanding. She became his eyes and ears in situations requiring someone who could navigate between worlds, who could speak to human hunters and vampire lords with equal credibility. 2 months after the attack, she found herself back in the candlelit chamber where it had all begun. King Mordecai had summoned her there, saying only that there was something he wanted to show her. The 47 candles were lit again, arranged in the same geometric pattern. But this time, there was no poison, no ritual, no emergency. Just 2 beings who'd seen each other's souls and emerged changed. "I've been thinking," King Mordecai said, "about what you said during the purification, about loneliness, about choosing to be better than one's nature. What about it? I think perhaps the greatest antidote to loneliness isn't finding someone who's the same as you. It's finding someone different enough to challenge you, similar enough to understand you, and trustworthy enough to see you completely without flinching." He gestured to the candles. "These flames represent the old powers, the primal forces that existed before distinctions of species or nature. They remind us that beneath all our differences, we're all choosing how to exist in the same world." Lysandra studied the pattern. "That's surprisingly philosophical for a vampire king." "I have my moments," he smiled slightly. "What I'm trying to say, rather badly, is that you've become important to me. Not as a hunter or an advisor, though you're excellent at both, but as someone who sees me, all of me, and chooses to stand beside me anyway. That's rare, precious." "Same," Lysandra said quietly. "Everything I thought I knew about vampires, about revenge, about justice, You've complicated all of it, made it more human, ironically, made me realize that the monsters aren't defined by what they are, but by what they choose to do. So, where does that leave us? Partners, I think, in whatever form that takes. Fighting the good fight, making impossible decisions, trying to make the world slightly less terrible while accepting we'll never completely succeed. She moved to stand beside him, looking at the candlelight patterns. It's not the life I imagined as a young hunter, but it's the one I choose now. Then I'm honored to walk it beside you. They stood together in the flickering light, two beings from different worlds who'd found unexpected common ground in the space between. The candles burned on, representing forces older than memory, reminding them that some connections transcend the boundaries mortals draw. And in the darkness beyond the chamber, the world continued, complicated, dangerous, occasionally beautiful. They would face it together, choosing in each moment to be better than their natures demanded, to see each other truly, to trust despite every historical reason not to. It was enough. It was everything.